Douglas, as usual, dropped his son off at school and turned to him and said, "Connor, please make sure that neither the class teacher nor the principal call me again to complain about your behavior. I am tired of getting ashamed every time I'm told off for your bad behavior." "Okay, Dad," the boy nodded obediently and, waving his father goodbye, ran off to school. Connor did well in almost all subjects, but he had difficulties with literature. However, the boy was not too worried about it. His father was the director of a large construction company, and he was the sponsor of the school as well. So, Connor was sure that if something would go wrong, his father would use his influence, and they wouldn't dare to give Connor a bad grade. And so it was, and up to a certain moment, the boy was forgiven for everything. But then one day the literature teacher had to go to the hospital for surgery. Of course, the children take the news of the teacher's illness with excitement, hoping that it would be easier for them to get good grades with a substitute teacher. "You rejoice too early," grinned the principal. "The substitute teacher is quite strict, and you won't be fooling around with her. She isn't Mrs. Martin, who pretended not to notice how you cheat on your tests and take your essays off the internet." The kids were alarmed, and the principal told them that the new teacher used to work in prison. "Has she been guarding in the tower with a gun?" asked Connor, and the class burst out laughing. "Well, of course not. But she taught literature in the colony for juvenile. So she is a very tough woman, and you will definitely behave," said the principal as seriously as possible. The children's imagination drew a horrible picture, and all the children froze in astonishment, and the principal, satisfied with the effect she had produced, went on about her business. When the next day Miss Bailey, the new literature teacher, entered, the 8th graders exhaled. A skinny, short, blue-eyed blonde with a soft smile did not produce the impression of oppressive supervisors, and children thought that the principal intentionally intimidating them. But they rejoiced too early. It turned out that Miss Bailey had a strong character and iron restraint. She immediately stopped all provocations, and even in the most difficult situations did not once raise her voice. Each misbehaving student was enough just a glance of her blue eyes, which immediately became cold and prickly, and a kind smile was not a trace. At the same time, she explained the material so well that even the slowest student in the class could understand her. As a result, no one ever managed to ruin the lesson, and over time Miss Bailey has become an absolute authority for all the pupils. But not for Connor. He disliked the new teacher from the beginning, and he stubbornly continued to do everything to make her mad and completely neglected his studies. Even his classmates could not understand why he was angry with the new teacher and repeatedly tried to talk some sense into him. "I don't like her, that's all." That was the usual Connor's answer. The boy continued his hooligan antics, relying on his father's authority at school, but near the end of the quarter it became clear that Connor was getting an F in literature. As a result, the principal summoned the boy's father to the school, inviting the teacher to talk to him as well. "Connor is not interested in the studying at all," Miss Bailey told the boy's father. "There are exams coming up, and if things continue like this, I'm afraid that Connor will have serious problems." "But he didn't have any problems in his studies before you appeared," parried Douglas. "I don't want to say anything bad about the previous teacher, but it was clear to me at once that your boy had big gaps in his knowledge," she said sharply, and the principal blushed and lowered her eyes at these words. At home, Douglas paced around the room indignantly. He was sure his son was doing quite well in school, and the new teacher's words had hurt his feelings. "How dare she? She's just came, and she's already making her own rules," exclaimed Douglas indignantly. Indeed, his wife agreed with him. "Is it possible that our son is the silliest kid among all of his classmates? You need to discuss this problem with the principal urgently." "Yeah, I've already talked to her. She promised to make an impact on this teacher, but I doubt about the result. You should have seen this Miss Bailey, short, skinny as a reed, and looks at you like she's the boss." Then his wife advised Douglas to talk privately with the teacher and explain to her who he was, so she would finally understand how to treat their son properly. But Douglas answered that he had already tried to hint to the stubborn teacher about how many modern new equipment and teaching materials he had bought for the school recently. Miss Bailey only grinned on this and said that these gifts did not increase the amount of knowledge in Connor's head. "What a cheeky woman," exclaimed his wife indignantly. "Then we must get her fired." Connor, of course, overheard the entire conversation between his parents and was outraged too. He could not understand why this teacher allowed herself to be so unkind to him, to the son of a respected businessman. So the boy decided to take revenge on Miss Bailey for her bad, as he thought, attitude. He followed the woman after school and quickly figured out her address. It turned out to be a rather shabby 5-story building on the outskirts of the city, and Connor even grinned. He was amused by the fact that the person who taught others how to live lived in such a terrible place. After finding out from the local kids that the teacher lived on the first floor, Connor decided to prepare everything and come back tomorrow. The next evening, he was standing under the window of Miss Bailey's apartment, clutching a huge brick in his hand. He smiled maliciously, imagining in his mind how the glass would shatter into tiny pieces, and the teacher would shout in terror as the frosty winter air rushed into the room and made her shiver with cold. He decided to get close enough not to miss, but suddenly he noticed some movement inside the room. The boy became curious and stood on the bench under the window. He peered in and froze in shock. Miss Bailey was not alone in the room. A girl was sitting in a wheelchair next to her. She was about Connor's age. The woman carefully massaged her legs and then, lifting her up, tried to keep her in a standing position. The window was slightly ajar for ventilation, and Connor could hear the conversation. "Mom, I can't do it anymore. Let's accept the fact that it's all useless. I'll never be walking again." "No, Audrey. Don't you dare think like that and give up. You'll see, everything will change. You just have to keep following the doctor's recommendations." "That's enough, Mom. We'll never save that much money for an operation, and without it all is useless," cried out the girl in despair. The girl cried, and Miss Bailey sobbed beside her. Connor watched all this and could not come to his senses. He felt shocked that the teacher had a disabled child, and they were living so poorly, and that this resilient and strong woman could cry so bitterly. Connor looked at the brick in his hand, and he suddenly felt unbearably ashamed. He might have been a bully, but he would never hurt a weak or abused person. And although his parents spoiled him immensely, they still managed to teach him true values. Connor threw away the brick and ran home. He could not forget the scene he had witnessed. He agonizingly tried to understand what had happened in his teacher's family and what kind of operation they were talking about. At first, Connor thought to ask the teacher directly, but he realized that it was unlikely she would discuss it with him. That was why he decided to act differently. He found Miss Bailey's daughter, Audrey, through social media. A happy-looking girl was looking at Connor from the picture on the page, and she was standing on her feet. There were many more pictures. In one picture, Audrey was on horseback. In another one, she and her mother were in the mountains. In the third one, they were gathering flowers in the countryside. It was clear that Audrey had no health problems before, and Connor was going to find out what had happened. He decided to make friends with Audrey through the internet and wrote her a message. Audrey responded, and they began chatting. It turned out that they both liked dogs, and in general, they had a lot in common. Audrey liked everything Connor told her. She also told him about her life. She used to live with her mom and dad in another city. They had a big house, her father had his own business, and her mother had been a teacher at a private school. And then everything fell apart. Her father met another woman, brought her into their home, and threw her and her mother out on the street. The girl recalled how she only had time to grab the bare necessities and her dog, and they went with one suitcase in a cab to her mother's friend's house. But on the way there was an accident. The pet was killed, and Audrey received a serious spinal injury. Doctors said that they needed an expensive operation abroad, and Mom immediately told her father. But he did not even come to visit Audrey. He said that he had another family now and all the money in the business. Connor was furious. He thought that his father would never do such a mean thing and would do even the impossible for him. "I had the operation," Audrey continued to tell him. "We moved into the apartment my grandmother left us. At first, my mother was teaching at a school in a juvenile colony, but it became psychologically difficult for her there. And then she found a good job in a private school, and she basically likes working there, only there are a few problems with some pupil. But my mom's strong, she could handle it." "What about your surgery? Can it help you?" Connor finally uttered a question that had been worrying him ever since he saw Miss Bailey sobbing for the first time. "It is possible, but it is very expensive. No one fund took care of us," replied Audrey, and then fell silent. Connor realized that he had hurt her feelings. He imagined her sitting and crying in front of the monitor, and his heart ached. The decision came instantly. In the evening, Connor told his parents about the situation. "Yes, it's a terrible pity about the girl," said Douglas, gloomily. "I just don't understand her father. How can someone throw a child out of his life?" said Connor's mother, sighing heavily. Douglas hesitated, and then asked his son how much money she needed for the operation. Connor didn't know that, and then Douglas decided to talk directly to Miss Bailey and find out everything. When he went into her office in the evening, the teacher was sitting checking the workbooks. When she looked up, she said in surprise, "Good evening. Are you here about Connor? You know, I've noticed a positive change in his behavior and learning lately. I think we could fix the situation with his grades from now on." "I'm delighted to hear this, but that's not why I came to talk to you," answered Douglas, and told her the reason for his visit. He admitted that his son had met Miss Bailey's daughter on the internet, and he was very worried about her. Douglas added that he would like to help and asked to tell the sum necessary for the operation. Miss Bailey did not feel comfortable even talking about her daughter's illness, but Douglas insisted. After hearing how much she needed, the man realized that even though it was a huge sum, it was quite realistic. He immediately estimated how much he would be able to transfer himself, how much his partners would be able to give, and also he had a reserve option. He took the details of the account, said goodbye and left, while Miss Bailey was thinking about how she was misjudging this man. Before, she thought that Douglas only cared about his own well-being, but now it has become clear that he was a good man, not like her ex-husband. Thinking about her daughter's father, Miss Bailey sighed heavily. She remembered how she had kneeled before him and asked him to help their daughter because he had such an opportunity. But he was adamant, and in the end he also expressed doubts about his paternity. That was the final point. Miss Bailey had gone back to her native city and for a long time had been asking help in different funds, but to no avail. And then suddenly help came from somewhere she had not expected. The next day, Douglas called all his partners and asked them to join him in his charity work. Many of them generously donated money, and soon the entire amount was transferred to the clinic. The surgery had to take place abroad, and Douglas and his family came to accompany Miss Bailey and Audrey to the airport. "Thank you. I will always remember your kindness," said Miss Bailey for the 100th time. "It's like you're saying goodbye. When you come back after the operation, you'll thank us," smiled Connor's mother. The woman was pleased with her husband's decision, and Connor was happy because Audrey would be able to walk. They became great friends over this time. The boy often visited his teacher, got to know her better, and realized that she was a very nice woman. Miss Bailey gave the boy extra lessons, and now he was one of the strongest students in his class in literature. Also, he improved in other subjects and became more serious and mature. On one of his last visits to Audrey's home, Connor jokingly told the girl, "Well, I thought I would be just visiting a girl, and instead of this you've got me studying." "Oh, of course. As soon as you wrote me the first time, I realized you had a problem with grammar, laughed Audrey. Why did you keep communicating with me then? Because I liked you right away, admitted Audrey, blushing. Connor smiled contentedly hearing that. Of course, he was insanely ashamed of that distant winter evening when he had been standing with a brick under the windows of their apartment, but he was not going to tell about it